Alright guys, this is Curtis here with you today. Today I'm going to go over one of the most common things I hear about, or common issues I hear about when using a remote collar. One of the most common things I hear is if the remote is not in my hand and I'm actively pushing the button, my dog will not come to me. If the collar is not conveniently on my dog, there's no way to get the dog to come to me. And unfortunately, this is going to be the majority of the time. If somebody left your front door open, your dog runs out, odds are collar's not on the dog because you weren't expecting it to happen. If the collar is on the dog, odds are you don't have the remote in your hand expecting the dog to run away from you. So that's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal when you cannot get your dog to come to you when you really need them to. So a lot of people start to rely on these things, which in certain situations is not a big deal. I mean, these are incredibly handy and convenient to have around. But again, if it's not in your hand and the dog doesn't listen, it kind of defeats the purpose of even using these things to a certain extent here. So the reason this happens, the reason people struggle with that stuff, is generally because the way that it was introduced or the way that it was taught. So I always kind of think, if I can recall my dog to me, that shows that the dog has a basic level of understanding as far as what I want from the dog. So if that's true, and I connect or combine my verbal command with my remote collar, why is the dog coming to me? Are they coming to me because of this? Or are they coming to me because they understood my command? Odds are they're coming to you because of the command. So all of a sudden you kind of get fooled into thinking that the dog actually understands this, that this is working. That's when you run into the scenario that the dog's not coming to you when you're talking to him. The other thing that happens very, very often is that, again, if you're teaching this at the same time as a verbal command, and that's the only way you recall your dog starts to associate. I only go to my human when I hear the command and I feel this. So all of a sudden, you ruined all the damage you did teach your dog recall in the first place. Because now the only way your dog will come is with a verbal command and they feel this. So now again, you almost did more harm than good. So what's the workaround for this? The workaround is, I always think using a remote collar should be completely separate from verbal commands. In my opinion, verbal commands have no place in teaching this because of what I just told you. The dog already understands command anyway. So anytime I'm teaching this, I always have the thought in my head, this is about pressure. The dog feels pressure, how do they turn it off? The only way that pressure disappears is by moving towards their human. That's it. That's the only way pressure disappears. So with that thought process in mind there, this becomes a much more effective way of recalling your dog anyway. So when this is used, it should basically be used as a fail-safe. Or, the dog's not listening, how you want to look at it here. So basically meaning, hey sweetie, come here, the dog ignores me. This is my reinforcement. Once the dog understands it, I can still use that command on top of it. Dog, come here, hit the button here. But it needs to be taught separately. That way you start to really see that the dog understands this tool rather than your verbal command. At some point, doesn't matter where you're at, what you're doing, you tap that button, the dog should feel it. Doesn't matter if they can hear you or not. They could be by the ocean, you could be out at the campground, whatever it is. They feel that pressure and they understand. I need to go run into my human in order for the pressure to disappear. So again, I treat them very, very different. This is about pressure. My verbal command, again, that was taught, who knows how long ago. So the way I do this is the beginning of how I introduce pressure. I prefer to use a slip lead here. This is a very high quality slip lead. Basically the idea of it is whenever I put this on the dog's neck and I pull it tight, this will tighten based on how much pressure I apply. So the reason I use this rather than using your traditional flat collar, the one that your dog has his tags on, rabies tags, things like that, is if I'm trying to pull my dog to me with this, and let's say my hand was their neck, and they don't want to go, it will tighten so I can pull or say this way, I guess people like it. This is their head, I'm pulling, it will tighten so I can move my dog. Because if I'm trying to use this with my e-collar, I need that dog to move. I need them to understand that once the pressure, once you feel it, move towards me, the pressure is gone now. If I'm using their everyday collar that their neck, or that's always sitting on them there, you try to do this with that collar, your collar most likely slip right off their head. And then if you're layering it with this, odds are your dog's gonna run away from you. And now this all of a sudden means be scared and run away, which is the opposite of the goal here. So I'm not gonna go over how to size these and what all the buttons and all the features is here. There's all types of videos all over the internet. You can learn that type of stuff. I'm just going over the basic gist of the introduction. So this is my first thing. I'm going to use my slip lead, slip it over her neck. This has a nice little leather, it's not a strap, I'm not sure what you call that here. But I can pull that down, so that way, if there's a little bit of slack in the leash, it's not just going to pop right off of her head. Come here, Scoopy. So basically the idea is, in the beginning, before I even introduce the remote collar, the way she learns to remove the pressure is she feels pressure. When she moves to me, there's slack in the leash. Very, very basic stuff. I'm not going over anything advanced here. Again, she's hanging out, not doing anything. Again, pressure. She moves towards me, pressure's gone. That's very easy for her to understand. The remote collar, on the other hand, much more complicated here. Because this pressure to her, there's no direction to it. Direction meaning, if I want her to move towards me, I pull her towards me. This does not do that. This is just pressure. That's why I'm layering them on top of each other. So basically, again, there's videos about how to find your dog's working level. I'm not going to go over that today. But your working level, for the most part, should be pretty low. This is not about pain. This is just pressure. Again, the pressure here is very, very slight. The pressure with this is going to be very, very slight. It's not much pressure involved. So basic technique here, basic idea. I'm doing them at the very exact same time. I hit this button. I'm using the continuous button. Continuous button basically means it's going to continuously apply stim until I let go of it. I'm doing this at the same time that I'm applying this pressure. I don't need a lot of distance. I don't want a lot of distance. I want the dogs to stay close. So in the beginning stages, I can keep it very, very simple for her. So I apply pressure with this at the same time I apply pressure here. Once she moves to me, this one actually has slack in the leash. That's when I let go of this button. Again, I'm not talking. If I talk, it's kind of counterproductive to a certain point here. So I apply pressure with both. As she moves towards me, I let go. And then I change directions, and I do the same thing again. There's pressure, and I let go when she moves. As she advances and she starts understanding me a little bit better, then I can start adding a little bit more distance. So pressure with both, and let go. As time goes on and on and on, you will start to notice that you use less and less and less of the leash pressure. That's when your dog can start understanding that this pressure is basically, if not the exact same as this pressure. I feel pressure, I move towards my human. And you notice I am moving. I'm moving backwards. That helps trigger her to move in my direction. As I start to see she understands it more and more and more, eventually I will drop the leash, apply the pressure, and then she should move towards me as I do it. Again, as soon as she starts to move, I remove the pressure. And I'm going to do this over and over and over. This is not something that's done in 5 minutes, 20 minutes a day. Do it a lot. Do it over and over and over until you consistently see. Doesn't matter where I'm at eventually. When the dog feels this pressure, they should understand that's my human. My mommy, my daddy, whoever is normally doing it here. I need to move towards them to remove the pressure. As you see the dog starts doing it, then you can slowly introduce a little bit of praise. You see them move towards you. Oh, good girl, good puppy. Love on them. You don't got to be uber numb here. Eventually, you can be a little more excited with them. And then as you start to see the dog understands it, meaning they move towards you without any verbal command, that's when you can start adding a verbal cue. Again, I'm not really layering on top of this just yet, though. It's simply a matter of, hey, sweetie, come here. If they do, it's not used. It's not needed. That's the missing part. Most people will constantly use a verbal command with this forever. Fast forward 10 years, you still have to. This way, the dog learns. If the human calls me, I come to them, they love on me. If I do not come to them, then I feel this pressure. Again, the pressure almost will always be the most effective way to get a dog to come to you, especially if there's stuff going on. You have kids around, deer, horses, cows, bicycles, whatever it is. But that's the basic introduction here of how we're going to introduce this collar. Again, as time goes on, the more and more they understand it, hopefully you won't need this at all anymore.